Testing, testing. One do I say. Surely two should follow. Medieval test run, yes indeed. Good evening. Welcome to the Angry History Chef. This is your host, Kieran Kirkham, and his spooky goth wife. Say hello.
Hello.
There we go. You see, that's that part done, folks. And this evening's talk is about the early medieval period. Now, I had a question sent in from Olaf Badgerson.
Did you?
I did. She asked me to talk about, this is why we're talking about clothing and why Hollywood keeps shoving Vikings and Saxons in leather and fur.
And undercuts.
And all sorts, yes, and all the monstrosities that Hollywood have to blame.
Yeah.
But before we get to Hollywood, what we need to do is talk about the actual context of early medieval clothing, production and reasons for it and everything else.
Yep.
We will get to the ranty part, so to speak, and the hatred of Hollywood, but we've got to give everyone a base level of information they can all use.
So they can be angry as well.
Yes,
yeah.
Everyone's got to be angry. So we're going to start with understanding clothing in the early medieval period, mostly made of wool and linen. Mm-hmm. Pretty much all produced by hand, by spinning, on warp-weighted looms.
Yep.
You've then got to consider man hours it takes to actually hand spin and then weave by hand all of this fabric, which then gives you a context of why fabric should not be underestimated as a sign of wealth in this whole period, and why Hollywood slapping everyone in leather and furs is stupid.
Yeah.
So, to give you a context, basic medieval garment of the poorest person in society by modern financial standards is £35,000. That's correct, folks. £35,000.
If you were being paid.
By hand at minimum wage in this country.
Yeah.
Okay?
Which is why slaves are a thing.
Yes. But even slaves are going to be in garments, and that's what I'm talking about with the 35 grand. Even your slave is in a 35 grand tunic almost. So, that gives you the poorest person in society to some degree in a modern context financially. It then goes upwards from there, and it is divided quite simply into three subjects. The type of weave used on the fabric, the amount of fabric you've used, and then the colour.
Yep.
So you could have a very complicated weave with quite a lot of fabric, and it could still be in undyed wool.
Yeah.
And you would still have considerable wealth.
Yeah.
To some degree.
So like my herringbone one.
The grey herringbone, like my grey herringbone.
Yeah.
It's a complicated-ish weave.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of it because it's Anglo-Saxon. Mm-hmm. Yes, I've got different coloured neckline and cuffs on it in a deep burgundy. But if I was, for example, to have my entire kirtle made of that deep burgundy in the same style it's cut currently, I would need vast quantities of gold and silver floating around on me. Yeah. Because I would be at almost the very, very top end of society. I would be in that, shall we say, 0.5% of society, which is monarchs, earls, dukes. I'm not. I'm a Shire Reeve by my own persona at reenactment.
Yeah.
You're
the Sheriff of Nottingham.
I'm the Sheriff of Nottingham, for all intents and purposes, in Anglo-Saxon Nottingham.
And even he doesn't get to wear black leather.
And I don't get black leather, yeah. I have some very nice mahogany-coloured leather, which is achievable with veg-tanned leather and beeswax and working it in...
Yeah, but you're not dressed head to bloody toe in it like a biker.
No, because, shockingly enough, Vikings aren't bikers, and neither are the Anglo-Saxons.
Lies!
No. Now, for those who don't know the Vike Society, it was founded back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. 1970... No, would have been 50th anniversary, so sorry. I tell a lie, it was founded in 1971. The problem with the Vike Society is it was founded by a bunch of bikers and nerds and all sorts of weirdos that society think is disreputable.
I don't think I've ever told you this story, but my aunt and uncle, when I told them, because they do reenactment, they're like Time Lords, they do all sorts of different time periods. And when I said I was joining the Vike Society, they literally said, "Oh, the biker mice from Mars," because that was the last time they were at a thing with the Vike Society, when there probably would have been a mini Nige running around with a katana.
Possibly. It'd been late 80s, early 90s, because for people to understand, authenticity truly kicked off with the 1,000-year anniversary of the Battle of Maldon, and the Vike Society had a big shift towards authenticity. So to get us back on track with clothing, and I've already stipulated what the minimum amounts you're looking at in modern terms of hand labour, minimum wage, man hours, so to speak, it would cost you. You've then, as I said, you've got to look at weave, colours, amounts of fabrics. Then add in things like embroidery, tablet weaving, silks on top of that. Now, silks aren't produced in our part of the world. They're produced in the Orient and are shipped in. So there's an even greater added expense. Now, the problem is, all of this is great, and it shows you how to strata society in the early medieval period.
Yeah.
Because you can generally go, right, they're wearing this amount of fabric, it is dyed, but how, like, colour fast is that dye is also a big indicator. Because the stronger a colour is on fabric, the richer you're going to be, because it means you can either A, pay for a dye that's going to last for a long time, or B, can afford to have it re-dyed regularly to keep it bright and colourful.
Because this is the thing about, like, oh, pink is for girls and blue is...
No. That's not a shift until almost the late 19th, early 20th century.
Because the whole point is that red washes out to pink. And blue was associated to the Virgin Mary, so you can jog on, Victorians.
Well, it's not even Victorians, it's the Edwardian period
Well,
onwards.
they can all jog on.
The Victorians still dressed boys in pink and girls in blue.
Exactly.
It's very much an Edwardian shift.
Yeah.
Because it was the manly man thing of Edward the Seventh. I have to remember, I believe it's Edward the Seventh. I can't remember my... I think it is Edward the Seventh.
Need
for
to
the
sing the
Edwardian
horrible
period.
history song.
I do, because then it's like William, Henry, first, No.
No, it's alright, I'm not going to put you
Yeah,
on the
no,
spot.
it is Edward the Seventh, dear. Well done for reminding me of that song. So, 1 second.
He's got to drink his tea.
I'm a bit parched here today, folks. It's been a hot all day.
Of the sun.
It's a balmy, Mediterranean-ish 27, 28 degrees in the Angry History Chef stronghold.
It's bullshit, that's what it is.
It
that's
is
that's
absolute
what
bullshit.
the temperature is. That's what my thermometer
says. It is,
says.
but you distracted me, darling.
Sorry.
Back to fabric and costuming and the Hollywood bullshit. So, as we say. So, how does this all relate to Hollywood, you may ask? Well, the being is, Hollywood seems to only like dressing any early medieval show, and I'm not just talking films here, I'm talking the Last Kingdom TV programme, I'm talking The Vikings by the History Channel. And The Vikings by the History Channel isn't just the costuming to some degree. There's a whole lot wrong with that. There is one or two, and I say this with grudging respect, there is one or two bits that might be accurate.
Out of how many hours?
But overall, and the timeline is one of them. And I say that with like a goalpost width of margin of error on their timeline here. Given, for its own reasons, bringing Rollo, who's technically meant to be someone's brother, in as the Earl of... Now, we do know that the Earl of Normandy, Duke of Normandy even, Duke of Normandy was Rollo. It was Rollo the Ganger, as in Rollo the Walker, because he was a very large gentleman who couldn't really ride a horse. Whether it's because he was incredibly fat or just incredibly tall, we don't know. I always assumed he was just that corpulently fat that he'd just break the horse's back.
Yeah.
Because horses in this period, 14
14
hands, they're ponies. They're technically ponies. Icelandic style ponies of today, the Dartmoor style ponies. But yeah, so fashion and Hollywood in the early medieval period just don't go together. Now, a lot of it, I think, is down to the creative direction of if you show actual fashion department authentic clothing properly, they look at it and they go, that's fucking boring, it doesn't look good on camera.
But it could.
No, the other big issue is it doesn't look good on camera is because sometimes the colours don't show up on the camera because of... I know, but it's a load of bullshit in some respects.
Yeah,
because...
They did that Viking princess thing that was on the BBC, and that was the Glasgow Vike.
It was the Glasgow Vike.
And that looked really good.
It did, but that was because, I think, if I remember correctly, it wasn't really... It was the BBC, it was more a television-based thing. Yeah, and also, if you watch American TV programmes to British TV programmes, there seems to be a difference in how the camera highlights. I always think the Americans put some form of filter on all their cameras.
Yeah, have you not seen that thing on the internet where it's like the same skyline, and then it's got like Mexico, and Mexico's got this kind of like brown coloration.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. But I think it's American filtering.
Yeah. They've got like a grey kind of like
on all their films for some reason.
It's gritty. It's in the past.
Yeah,
it's going to be dark.
And it's like when you watch. So the BBC one's done on a standard BBC camera thing. So the Viking Princess one showed you what it would look like. Now, costuming in our period, in terms of actual day-to-day clothing, is hard wearing. It's practical.
Yeah.
It wasn't pristine all the time. It would get worn out. It would be patched. It would be repaired.
Yeah.
We know this. And the colour fastness, again, all varies. So the problem is, Hollywood sees this and goes, oh, well, why can't it all just be made modern, bright, vibrant? So it's not only that they're rejecting the fact that they think the medieval period, early medieval period costuming is boring to some degree. It's the fact that nothing is vibrant unless you are excessively wealthy. But then they always go, and then they go over the top, like AC Valhalla, one of the finest examples.
Yeah.
The amount of badly done later medieval styling costumes in that, where it's embroidered in gold, it's embroidered in this, that and the other, it's flashy to hell. And to some degree, the highest parts of society were that flashy.
Yeah.
But you needed money.
You needed money and you needed time to not be doing other things.
And this is one thing about embroidery. In our period, you have to consider, and it's a big debate that happened currently due to reasons in the Viking society, and there was a shift in how embroidery is treated in the society. Now, there is a big difference between a decorative stitch done in a long haul at night, after the day's labours are done, and a 12-inch by 6-inch piece of embroidered work. And this is where being rich comes into it. Because if you are a person, and I'm not going to say ladies, as much as it was women, I'm not trying to be sexist here, but as much as people doing embroidery in the early medieval period were women, it required women who had fuck all to do, generally speaking, to produce these beautiful, great big panels of embroidered work. Now, workshops were being set up towards the mid-late 10th century, 11th century. They were founded, however, by high-class ladies and their friends to have a separate revenue to some degree from their husbands. So they were financially independent.
Well, plus it's like, you've seen how long it takes me to do like a cross stitch.
Yes.
And I mean...
And you're following a pre-designed pattern with a simple stitch.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the stitch work in this period isn't overly complicated anyway.
But you know what I mean? It's like, if you're going to do a solid panel, it's going to take time. And if you've been like literally running after children, running a farm, keeping an eye on slaves and all this kind of thing.
The most you might achieve is a light decorative stitch. And I'm talking to some degree... Anyone in society to some degree could put a decorative stitch on, because they're going to repair things, they're going to be doing other things.
Well, plus, like you said, you kind of almost discounting, as you said, like by thinking, oh, well, people have got all this time to focus on embroidering something. You've got to have made the bloody cloth first before you even get to embroider it.
Yeah.
So you're not going to focus on like, oh, well, fuck doing all this
this
weaving. I'm just going to sit and embroider this thing for hours.
Now, villages may have had women who were expert weavers, and they may have been compensated for not working on their own land with payment for cloth from other things. Now, it's all going to balance out as an economic, agricultural-based society.
Yeah.
It does. I am not saying that each household made its own cloth, did its own thing. No, because everywhere was a community.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a woman, for example, who is going to be the best weaver in that whole village. But she is not going to be weaving enough cloth to make everyone look loaded to the nines, because she's got her own shit to deal with. And there might be a number of women who are the best spinners in that whole village.
Yeah.
And they might be able to spin 3 times the amount of wool into threads in one day than like any other woman in the village.
Plus you weaponised your kids with it, didn't you?
Well, all girls
were
and all the boys were learning to plough in the fields and started farm work and everything else. That's the whole point of an agricultural based economy.
Yeah.
If you didn't have to work hard, you were rich.
Yeah.
Now, this is again coming into production of fabric, and you don't see this mass industrialisation of fabric on a truly industrial scale till the invention of the spinning jenny in the 17th century.
Yeah.
And then within about 50 years of the spinning jenny, the steam-powered loom is invented, and the spinning jenny goes out the way of the window. Now that's James Watt and co.
Yeah.
With the steam-powered loom. Lovely men of the Industrial Revolution, and all those kids that lost limbs and everything that we must pay homage to give us modern productions.
No, I mean, this is what we're hurtling back towards.
We
here,
are in some respect.
Honest work for honest children.
Yep. And I'll just start reinvesting in the coal chimney industry.
No, we just need to buy shares in workhouses. Yeah. I reckon that's the way it's going.
So, back to fabric, and where was I? I was talking about social structures of fabric production and kids.
Producing.
So kids, girls, literally as soon as they're old enough to walk, spindles and wool would be put in their hands and they'd be taught to spin. And by the time you were 12, most men would be looking for a wife. Bearing in mind the average marriage age is 12 to 14.
Yeah.
It is. You think 12, 13, 14 getting married and expected to be pregnant on the wedding night type principle, and men were looking for women who could carry a pig under each arm, spin, weave, cook. And I'm not saying that the man had it easy, but the man was the one going out.
Well, he was doing the manual.
He was doing the ploughing the field, repairing buildings, laying hedges, digging ditches, all vigorously intensive manual labourous jobs.
See, this is the interesting thing, because you haven't mentioned, like, people seem to think that all the men were jumping around on ships and killing monks and raiding.
No. Because this is the whole point. The percentage of people who weren't working for a living to make fabric, to put food on the table, is the top 5% of society.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
And those who are wealthy enough to not have to work and produce fine weave clothing, not always fine weave, but produce better clothing, have a better standard of living, and also give military service, is actually about the top 15% of society. But the reality is it's actually only the top 5, maybe 10% at a push in an emergency, nationally speaking. And that's in England, early medieval England.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say Anglo-Saxons, folks. That's a phrase I no longer like to use due to a lot of kerfuffle in the academic world where they no longer use Anglo-Saxon because it's been co-opted by right-wing extremists.
Oh, what hasn't?
So, unfortunately, I will generally now refer to early medieval English and the early medieval Scandinavians.
Yeah.
Because this thing of Norse, Vikings and Anglo-Saxons, unfortunately, both have kind of been co-opted by right-wing extremists, and it's kind of caused a lot of issues in the academic world.
Yeah.
So people I know have been having to change their theses where they've had Anglo-Saxon and they've had to change it all to early medieval English.
Well, thank God for Control F.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying.
Yes, indeed. So now, Hollywood are messing it all up, as I've said, and it's what really gets me is they like putting everyone in leather. They think it looks cool. It's like the massive fur on all the shoulders. Like everyone's a fucking extra out of Game of Thrones. It's fucking awful.
It is literally
now, what makes this worse is the fact that leather in this period and furs in this period are really hard to achieve.
What do you mean?
In the sense of the amount of work it goes in to make leather means leather is very expensive and is used quite frugally in the sense of shoes, belts, the odd other thing.
Yeah.
Skins in this time were either tanned by brain or tanned by salt. Now, brain tanning is much more effective on fur and gives it longevity. Now, here's an interesting fact for you. And I apologise for all the vegan and animal-loving people out there who might have issues with...
Just pause, just fast forward it a little bit.
But every animal in its head technically has enough brains to tan its own hide.
Ooh.
And I mean every animal, including humans. There is enough brains in our heads to tan our entire bodies as a skin.
I didn't know you could do that with the brain.
That is the best way and is still the preferred method of tanning. But rather than mushing up brains, we've now chemically produced the chemicals produced by mushing up a brain to get on the skin. And it makes it a little less smelly. Because this is the other thing of making leather and fur. It would reek. If everyone was wearing leather and fur, the stench, you wouldn't want to go near anyone. And you might eventually acclimatise to it. But every time someone needed new leather or new fur, that stench would be back. Because your nose had acclimatised to one thing, but the fresher it is, the stronger it's going to be.
Plus, like, I think, like you said, the whole point of being loaded wasn't that you had, like, 12 foxes strung to a frigging neck scarf.
No!
It was through, like you said, your fabric and everything else.
You're
and,
showing off with
having a
embroidery
giant cloak that's made out of material, not fucking... I mean, there's the bare skin...
Right,
but
no,
that's
no.
for like uber loaded people.
Yeah,
isn't
but the fur isn't on the outside.
No,
the
just
fur
to keep
is
you warm.
so you would have maybe a very high quality woven dyed woolen cloak lined in fur. The fur
Yeah.
isn't on the outside because it gets wet and it starts detanning and it reeks and it's awful.
It's heavy.
It's not going to keep you insulated.
No.
The fur lines your cloak and keeps the heat in because
Yeah.
the hair follicles of the fur, of course, trap your body heat
Yeah.
and rebound it back into your body, keeping you warm.
I can't-
You only have to look to the native people of northern Canada and the Inuit tribes, and if you look at any of their sealskin clothing or fur clothing, the skin is on the outside and the fur faces inwards
Yeah.
because it's used to trap the heat. So again, this idea of Hollywood shoving furs on everyone's shoulders is absolute utter bollocks because it completely defeats the point of putting fur on your clothing.
I can't even imagine how horrible it would be to be hauling around a frigging sheep fleece that's sopping wet and cold around your shoulders.
Yeah.
You'd keel over.
Bearing in mind, I have my green hood that was yours
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
tricked out with some beautiful tablet braid around the hood part,
You're
and,
welcome.
and I lined it with hair.
Yes.
Well, hair skins.
Well.
Yeah, well, hair skins for the purposes of actually getting hair is damn near impossible, but the difference between a rabbit skin and a hare skin would require an actual
Yeah.
lagomorph specialist.
If you're going to bring a microscope to a living history encampment, you're probably going to get clocked round the head by something first.
Probably with it.
Oh,
Probably with
yes.
your own microphone. Now, so I've got a fur-lined hood around the lower edge inside. Now, when I wear that hood, it is normally with my big two-layered woolen cloak over it. So the hood is separate to the cloak, and I will often have that cloak on over the hood. So the hood sticks through where my neck hole is on my cloak. So the fur's protected
Yeah.
by my cloak,
Yeah.
and it's just the hood part where there is no fur that's outside. It's
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want my fur getting wet and stinking. Because I walk in the tent and I reek like dead.
Well,
Yeah.
you just think, like, even with Mr. Papadopoulos.
Yeah, he gets wet, he's living and he reeks.
It's like the other day I walked him and he sat under my desk at work.
And all you can smell is wet dog.
I've just got wafts of
Wet dog, yeah, as he dries out. Yeah. So, Hollywood seem to think that everything should be biker mice from Mars. With leather and furs and and the whole premise is kind of no. It's just no.
But this is what I don't get right. Is because when we've watched older films,
Yes.
like the 1930s, like Robin Hood.
Right,
Now,
the
I know
Robin-
that's not Vikings, but you bear with me. But you said that's more accurate.
It is a lot more accurate at
than
times.
half the bloody Robin Hoods that have come after it.
Yeah, and
I
that,
just there's like obviously there's a time period.
now I'm not saying
somewhere
I'm not
where-
saying now my spooky goth wife, good old Fliss, has said this. And as much as but I'm not saying they are 100%.
No.
But there are more accurate portrayals in like some of the Errol Flynn and those kind of period Robin Hood films and medieval films to some degree than what you actually see in a lot of modern medievally style film. Like Ridley Scott's one of the few people, and I will take my hat off to Ridley Scott, bless his cotton socks, because he tries and he often runs into the Hollywood
Yeah.
issues. Now, Ridley Scott, his most accurate historical film to some degree, and it's still full of glaring inaccuracies to its own reasons, is Kingdom of Heaven. Okay?
It's one of Kieran's favourite films.
It is. But it is...
The director's cut.
Oh, yeah, the fully extended director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven. It is, as a rule, one of the better historical films.
Yep.
Along with The Outlaw King on Netflix, with Chris Pines in, playing Robert the Bruce.
You were very... He sat through all of that.
That is relatively, I would say, and I will stake my honour on this, about 75% accurate
You got
for
angry
the
about
outlook.
the plastic
The silly
horse
plastic,
things.
but that's because a modern horse wouldn't. First of
Yeah.
all, that's a fantasy trope piece of horse armour. That's also, well, it's not a trope, but you don't see breastplates like that on a horse
No.
till the 15th century. There's a very famous battle where there was 2,500 horse fully decked out in plate armour, and English warbows did jack shit.
Yeah.
And the English still won. Well, the French went, aha, we've defeated their archers, because we're so... And it's like, yeah, but there's still 2,500 foot infantry behind with polearm sunshine, and they're not having a good fucking day. So, bring your fucking overgrown donkeys and pointy sticks, lads, because you're having it. Because that is the English attitude in the medieval period.
I think it's probably still about the same, to be honest.
Do you know what? We, as much as the football recently, it's a very nice segue into modern society from the medieval period. But as much as the football and the attitude you get, where people are trashing things and we're like, hey, England, that surprisingly is quite common from the medieval period onwards. It's the British, well, it's not the British, it's the English, it literally is the English mentality. And that really does just hark all the way back to Edward III onwards. And you can blame Edward III for the George's Cross as well.
Oh, there we go.
It's his fault. It is. You can blame Edward III.
You heard it here first.
You can blame Edward III. Now, I love Edward III, don't get me wrong.
Is he the one that had like 200 million children?
Edward I had 16 kids. Edward
Oh, that's the one I'm
Edward
thinking
III had, I think, 8 or 9.
No, it was the first I was thinking of because we watched that Castles programme.
Yeah, his wife was pregnant almost every year of their marriage.
Oh my god.
She got married and she was
They
like...
just decided they were going to repopulate the earth.
They
even
literally
though it
had
didn't
like...
need
Yeah,
it.
but it's really sad.
Oh yeah, because they hadn't, like, most
Like,
of them didn't, yeah.
We're talking like out of 16 kids, only like 3 survive in the wedding marriage. So it's like the toll it took on it. She passed away, unfortunately. That was Isabel of Castile.
Oh yeah.
She passed away at, unfortunately, at the age of 49, which
Oh,
is
don't
good innings
blame
for a
her.
medieval. Bear in mind, she was 49 when she passed away, had birthed 16 children, and had constantly been on the move for all of those pregnancies. She was never still.
Yeah.
Because she followed her husband around as he rampaged around
That's why
England.
she was always pregnant.
She went on crusade with him.
Oh my god.
Yeah, Isabella Castile, crazy lady, amazing woman. One of them, I will do some of my crazy queens of England and like my top 10 crazy queens of England who are crazy in the fact that they are badass mother truckers. Who, to quote a phrase, they are a bunch of boss ass bitches.
Yeah.
That is right. I will do a podcast at some point about queens of England who are boss ass bitches.
Anyway.
But anyway, fabric and Hollywood.
I have to put my thing in.
Yeah.
About I've raised this at the start. Bloody undercuts on all these friggin' Vikings where they've got half the head shaved. They were known for having beautifully kept long hair that they maintained and washed all the time.
Yes.
So
and
why
Hollywood
haven't
have given them undercuts because undercuts, dear, are for those edgy types.
Cool.
The
For the
cool kids. Those edgy types.
Super combo.
You know if you want a really cool haircut, kids, that's partially undercut, go and get a Norman haircut.
Ooh.
Then the back half of your head is shaved and you've got the front half with a long fringe. And do you know why the back half of your head is shaved? To stop the coif, your armoured hood, ripping your hair out.
It's like a reverse mullet. It's short in the back and long in the front.
It's not even short, it's basically tonsured, it's bold.
Yeah.
Because I can happily tell you having hair even my shortness, catching a coif as you pull your coif down and you rip clumps of your hair out. There has been times I've contemplated having a Norman cut for the simple factor of I don't keep like ripping my hair out with coifs. But this is why I have a hood.
Yes.
And I put a hood on and then put a coif on. Yes, I'm bloody boiling, but do you know what? It keeps my head from having my hair ripped out.
I don't even think... if that haircut ever comes back into fashion...
What, the Norman one?
Oh my god.
I could make it a resurgence.
No.
Well, if people want to go back to proper ways, as I've always jokingly said,
ways.
I'll go back to proper ways. I'll get a Norman haircut and start burning the North. How's that for you?
You like the North?
I know, this is the problem.
Oh my god.
I am a northern man at heart, at which point I'd rather... Okay, I'll do the reverse. I'll get beautifully long hair and burn the South.
Okay.
That's Viking way.
I'd be out of a job though.
No, you wouldn't. Wilmington's all around the world, darling.
Well, they're all in the south.
The rest of them's all around the world. And you're in the Midlands. You're technically in the Danelaw, darling. That's the whole point.
I'm very aware I'm in the bloody Danelaw.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, costuming. Why can't you have short sleeves? I didn't think Vikings had modesty. These are some of the things I've had to put up with this week. And by put up with, I've deflected it onto my wife to deal with before my head blew up and I lost my rag. And I told someone, before, I will reiterate this, before I told someone to suck it up and fuck off. And I didn't, and my very kind spooky goth wife dealt with the situation and was asking me questions to keep me calm. But why do people have long sleeves in this period? It's all about modesty, okay? England, long sleeves, wimples, everything covered, bloke or woman, no ankles showing, no neck showing, no wrist showings, no chest flesh showing of any kind, whether it's your tits, your man tits, or even just a bit of fur from where your chest hair is. Keep it hidden, because otherwise you're committing sin and it's all bad, because it's a deeply Christian country.
No, Angry History Chef. I have it on authority that all of the Vikings were cool pagans that didn't believe in modesty and had all their boobs out flapping about in the wind.
Let's look at it from the Viking perspective of why would you have long sleeves? Because you're in a country that averages -25 every fucking winter and short sleeves are just going to cause exposure and frostbite. You want multiple insulating layers. They are only going to work if they're all the same fucking length.
What about cool Viking summers around the fjords?
Cool Viking summers around the fjords. Brilliant. Do you know what you did in summer if you weren't a farmer in the Scandinavian countries? You went raiding.
Yeah.
At which point, if you're raiding to the east, it's predominantly wet and windswept and hot and open. Long sleeves there. You don't want sunburn. Infection's a big major factor here. They don't have sun cream. If you get sunburnt and caught, I don't know, skin cancer because you're outside 95% of the time when you're raiding and you're exposing skin constantly and you're doing it year on year for protracted time, and we're not talking a week here or there in bloody Benidorm, we're talking 3 months down the Costa de Volga while you're bloody well butchering all sorts of horse jobbies in what would become Russia one day. Or, as they finally realise, let's go west to England and Ireland, where, predominantly speaking, it's fucking pissing it down.
Apart from currently now, yeah.
Well, we're currently in temperatures last seen in the 14th century.
Yeah.
And while England, again, had very nice summers in the early medieval period, again, you don't really want to let yourself get burnt. Also, if you're raiding a predominantly Christian society and you need to blend in, you having a fashion style that's also slightly different to them isn't really going to help you blend in.
And the Anglo-Saxons were already Christian by this point, weren't they?
Oh God, yeah.
They've been
well, not even because of the Romans did. You get the expulsion of the I say the expulsion of the legions. The legions leave. We're very sad by this. I am very sad we left.
Kieran's never forgiven them.
I've never forgiven the Empire. So 410 AD, before I become indignant at the Empire, and that's a hard thing for me to achieve.
Strongly worded letter
to Jupiter and Mithras. Mostly all Mithras's fault, and then Christianity's fault. So 410, Rome withdraws allegiance. Well, 350, 410. England starts becoming a warlord-based state, where it's retinue-based warbands, so it's a warlordal state thing. Saxons start popping up. Whether this is huge migrations or a just change of higher levels of society or a mix of the two, the school's still out on that in terms of academia. Some people say it's just a migration of senior Saxons and then maybe a bit more migration. Who knows? They come in, they're pagan. They, of course, push or adapt, assimilate, replace what was there. They create 7 kingdoms. That's the Heptarchy. The Heptarchy eventually becomes 4 homogenised kingdoms of Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, East Anglia. Kent is kind of a kingdom still, but also it's not. It kind of gets amalgamated into Wessex to become what is known as like Wessex and Greater Wessex. It's a weird thing, and the map and the history is still out on that also to some degree, because Kent's always a bit weird in the whole medieval period in terms of kingdoms. But in terms of fashion, they start out pagan, the Saxons. They start out with some really cool costuming, very much stylised on Roman costuming. So yes, short sleeves exist. Embroidered tunics, all that. Look at the Sutton Hoo burial. Look at the reenactment lads who do that period. The 7th century, the 6th, 7th century Anglo-Saxon reenactors.
Yeah.
They have beautiful short sleeves and long sleeves, depending on what they are. But some of them are wearing 3 layers.
Yeah.
Where they will have 2 long layers, and then the short sleeve might be an early Anglo-Saxon, it's the wrap coat that you see.
Yeah.
Because they're early enough to be still wearing a fashion that still exists in Denmark, but it gets phased out in this country, like the peplos dress.
Yeah.
Because the peplos dress is still around at this time in Saxons.
Yeah.
And this is the whole point. The peplos is a European thing, but in Scandinavia, it kind of gets shoulder straps. So the brooches that normally hold a peplos, because you have an underdress and the peplos is like tube, it kind of transmorphs into the hangarock.
Yeah.
But the hangarock itself is only at like a very top end of society, and it spreads downwards through society.
Yeah, because it's not like a cooking apron.
No,
Like
no,
you
no.
wipe your greasy spoons on it.
A hangarock is very much a high status thing, and it's also again about showing off your wealth with 2 huge turtle brooches, the beads, and everything else. So this is the thing: Anglo-Saxon England changes because it becomes Christianized. And Offa is it? There's one last pagan Anglo-Saxon king, and my brain wanted to say Offa, and I don't think it is Offa. It begins with a P, and I think it's Padwain or something daft. No, it's earlier than what I normally do. I kind of ignore the middle, what I like to refer to as the migration period.
Yeah.
I kind of ignore that because it's the time of Arthur as the whole thing. The whole I can't deal with it because sometimes I'm just like, it's just too silly. So I ignore it. And not ignore it in a bad way, but just historically it has no appeal to me.
Yeah.
So I've not really studied it.
Yeah.
But the period we get to, very much Anglo-Saxon society is Christian.
Yeah.
And it's very devout, very, I don't want to say extremist, it's very, what's the word?
Not fundamentalist.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, because it's like fundamental Islam.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. If you want to look at early medieval reenactment and understand religion, look to current Islamic laws, look to current Islamic fashion styles that women have to wear. Now, I'm not talking about the burqa and the... Oh, which one is it? There's
Hijab?
2. No, the hijab is just the headscarf. There's 2. I think it's like the nakat.
Nakat?
I think it's the nakat and the burqa.
Oh,
they're the ones that...
dangerous territory.
No, it's not. What I'm saying is they're full body coverings with just the eyes visible. Those are very much a Middle Eastern style of fashion. But all the headscarf wearing that you see in the Islamic faith of covering the neck and the hair and everything, that is very much what early Christianity was like.
Well, that's what.
Well, not early Christianity, sorry.
No.
Not early Christianity.
No, like Anglo-Saxon Christianity.
Yeah, early Christianity in the context of
England
as England would become. Not early Christianity in the sense of like the concourse of Nicaea 300 AD and Christianity back. I'm not talking that earlier Christianity, although that was probably part and parcel of it back then as well, actually.
Well, yeah.
Head coverings were a thing. The thing is, you've got to realise is Romans came late to the party with Christianity. 300 AD, Romans decide to finally go Christian, and it's because of Constantine. You can blame Constantine for everything, I find. He did name Constantinople, used to be Byzantine, in the Kingdom of Thrace. Renamed it Constantinople in his name, like you do. Forced the entire empire to go Christianity. Anyway, that's me ranting about Rome's collapse to some degree. But yeah, so Anglo-Saxon head covering.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, it's a fundamental Christian country.
Yeah, and I always thought that your hair was seen as like
it's a
as
sexual
a lady.
allure.
Yeah,
but it's the neck. It's all about the neck.
And like as a bloke, for Vikings, it was like if another woman other than your wife was
seeing you.
Was washing your hair.
Yeah, there's all sorts of societal complications about brushing another man's hair, seeing bare chests, showing wrists, and all sorts, and they're all divorceable, unlike Anglo-Saxon society where divorce could happen and was common to some degree. It's nowhere near as common as divorce in, say, a Scandinavian context. Because, of course, Scandinavians come to Christianity eventually, and to some degree their fashions change. So your early medieval Scandinavian women would often have uncovered hair because there was no modesty thing about that with the neck, and it's Edith Swan neck, by the way. It's the beauty of the neck. It's not the hair, it's the neck. Don't ask me why. They must have all been vampires. It's the obsession with necks. But no,
there's somebody at White Wolf making notes.
Scandinavian women normally bound the hair up, though, if they were married.
It was practical.
Well, the point being, if you had unbound hair, it meant you weren't married.
Yeah.
Because it meant you weren't, to some degree, as you say, it's practical to have your hair bound up, particularly if you're running a household.
But if you're over a fire, or you out in, or even if you're out doing like farming things, but not necessarily like ploughing fields and stuff. But if you're milking a cow, you don't want your hair flapping around.
But this is the thing. Because small girls are just learning to spin,
Oh,
their hair doesn't need to be bound. It can just be...
Yeah.
So, you will see bits. Now, a lot of these laws, to some degree, you have to look... Weirdly enough, you have to look to Iceland and actually look to the 12th and 13th centuries at times to find these laws, because that's when they're really codified and written down.
Yeah.
Because writing becomes a thing, because Christianity has spread.
Yeah.
And because Christianity has spread, it changes the whole societal shift. So, again, with the clothing thing, Viking women generally aren't wearing headscarves because their society isn't a fundamental Christian-based society. It's a pagan society, but even pagans have modesty. Even pagans have, respect, and it's not some modern mindset about what a pagan is that's a bunch of carefree, live free, woo type bullshit. It's not. Pagan in the Norse period is the Norse gods are paragons of humanity. But because they're paragons of humanity, they have their own foibles. They are capricious. They are exactly like us. But it is the equivalent of someone reading Superman and wanting to live up to the ideals of Superman in terms of, you're not going to be able to jump a building or fly, but you know what I mean? You're going to live up to how Superman's moral code...
Brave and do the right thing.
And be strong and whatever. And it's the same with the Norse gods to some degree.
I mean...
You're going to respect Thor because he is the strongest and he is a warrior and everything else. So warriors are going to want to be imitation of him.
Yeah. It's like the Greeks. I mean, we all know what Zeus was about.
Whee!
And they had...
And Jupiter.
And they still... it didn't mean that all the women were there, shagging swans. Not that we know of. They were all very... I mean, it was horrifically misogynistic, but they were all covered up. They were generally... They were all modest in their own way. If you know what I mean. And they were still, by modern standards, pagan.
Well, yeah, because they're polytheistic.
Polytheistic.
That's it. Brain's not working at this point. It's too
hot.
hot. Brain's melting for that
damn hot.
Yeah, but yeah, so this is the whole thing. As much as I've tangent here from fabric and clothing originally, it all ties into how you look at society and why Hollywood constantly get it wrong, because they only look at it from an aesthetics viewpoint. If someone let me have the money to make a film and release it in Hollywood about, say, Alfred the Great, okay, I would attempt to give you as accurate as I could get.
Yeah.
And if I had to run with only 100 people in the whole thing, and the extras are just CGI'd extras to give me shield walls and stuff, I would rather have 100 completely accurate costumes that were worn and repaired throughout filming in the style they would have been than covered in leather and fur.
Well, it's like with Sasso Credo.
Yeah.
And it's like, that the Anglo-Saxons are all going to be the bad guys because they're Christians, so they're uncool.
And the problem is, and I know Christianity's got its own complications and issues and problems, but to some degree, as a Catholic, and most people won't realise this, I'm not a practising Catholic. I haven't set foot in church in a very, very long time. But I still have my faith in whatever form it comes in.
Yeah.
Now, the big problem I have with a lot of the times is, let's make the Christians the bad guys.
Yeah.
Is like, if you were to do that to any other religion, you'd be done for discrimination.
No, but it's not even just that. It's like they've just automatically made Alfred...
Yeah, the bad
like
guy.
the bad guy, when he actually did loads of cool stuff.
The problem also, when you look at it like that, is the fact that Vikings, traders, warriors, killing machines. Anglo-Saxons, farmers, traders, warriors, killing machines.
Yeah.
The Normans, less trading, more just butchery and bloodshed. And like, all nations, whether you want a unified England or the original 4 kingdoms or the original 7 kingdoms, war and death was day-to-day life in some form or another. Life expectancy was 40 to 50. 90% of the Vike society
It's too old.
is too old
Can you
and
imagine
would be dead by now.
Can you imagine getting that authentic? Like, I'm sorry, you're too old to be authentic.
Maybe we should bring it in as soon as you hit 50, out you go. There'd be a considerable change in how the society worked.
Kieran's hot takes.
Nige wouldn't be in it. Unless he's going to watch us. But the thing is, no, this is the point.
Sorry, I just had this image of Nige, like, as the hello, fellow kids.
Steve Buscemi with the skateboard. Hello, young friends.
Just like certain members of the High Council wearing like wigs and like
Yeah.
like on skateboards.
This is my point. If we want to really make it accurate, okay, no one over 50 can reenact early medieval period for one reason. Why? You're all dead.
Why are none of these teenagers pregnant?
Yeah! So that's what we need to be seeing here, people for early medieval. Teenage pregnancy and dead after 50. That's what we're taking away from tonight's show so far. If we're going for full accuracy from a Hollywood... But that's the problem. The other reason why Hollywood can't get in on things.
Yeah.
Because who wants to watch a bunch of 14 to 16-year-olds pregnant moaning about things while being all wimpled up and actually ruling the country?
Yeah.
The Tories would blow an aneurysm.
Blowing aneurysm.
They literally... The whole party would just be one giant aneurysm that blew up. This is the whole point. It's women were being married between 12 and 16, and if at 16 you weren't married and you hadn't got kids, off to a nunnery with you because there was clearly something wrong. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, and I'm not saying I approve of it. I'm just saying that is the period, that is society.
I mean, like, yeah.
And
I'm trying to take it back to clothing, but I can't.
no,
make
it
the
is
link.
clothing, because we can go into clothing and women's clothing, but also female Viking warriors. Now,
Oh,
here's
no.
a hot topic.
Oh no.
Now, there probably were female Viking warriors. That's a given. However, you were probably acting like blokes constantly.
Yeah.
Now, through history, there are women on the battlefield. It has been worked out, for example, that during the American Civil War, at least 5 to 10% of the Union Army, of its soldiers, were women. That's about 25,000 women on the battlefield. That's a division. There is a division's worth of women in the American Civil War for the Union alone.
Well, I'm going to go in the opposite historical direction and shout out the Ancient History Fangirls episodes on Amazons, because they talk about...
Skiffy and horsewomen.
Skiffy and horsewomen.
Yeah, now Mary Beard has a thing about Amazons and other things, and it's fine. But if you're going to be a female warrior in a male-dominated world, you aren't going to remain highly feminine.
I mean, you're not going to wear a dress, because it's
You're most
impractical.
certainly not. It's the most impractical thing. Oh, I've tripped up. Stab. Dead.
And plus, from the horrific point of view, you're also not going to really want to pronounce that you're a woman because of personal safety aspects. Do you know what I mean?
Well, if you're a woman without a male protector to some degree in the middle of a fucking big old army full of men...
Well, this was one of the reasons that Greek women stayed in the house.
Protection.
Yeah.
But that shows you to some degree the animalistic nature of humanity.
Well, yeah.
Because we are animals.
Yes.
And it's not on, and I'm not, again, we're not saying it's right, we're
No.
just saying this is the facts, this is the history to some degree.
I think the problem is, I think because we want to make the world better and we want to view things with the mindset that we have now, you can't project that mindset backwards in time because it wasn't there.
No, it really wasn't. You're missing all the social cues when it comes to clothing, society, religion, the whole lot The world is a very different place 1,000 years,
Even
yesteryears to now.
200 years ago, let alone 1,000.
70 years ago.
Yeah,
Just go 70 years ago, darling. The world's changed in 70 years more than it's changed in anything else. But clothing-wise, women, again, and Hollywood showing women all the time. This is the problem. You look at The Last Kingdom, or you look at all the ladies who aren't portrayed as fighters, for some reason, seem to have a décolletage that you literally could balance pints on. They all seem
wrong with that.
Well, there is when it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be on the show.
But when they've literally all seem to be corseted and their boobs under their chin, like you can balance pints on it. I'm not saying that that's wrong for a woman to do. What I'm saying is it's completely wrong in a clothing aspect.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't be showing that much flesh. The only kind of women who show their ankles and that much flesh, I'm afraid to say, are prostitutes.
Who would do that?
Who would flash their ankles, Una Ankle Flasher?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Not me.
I know.
The name is satirical.
It is.
Because I would never do that.
No, you would never.
That's the joke.
And to be honest, you didn't.
I was getting out of a 10.
No, this is my point. You were getting out of 10, but it makes a very comedic story.
It does. It does, and I ended up marrying Nige, so it worked out well.
Yeah, well, yeah. And then you kind of went, I've had enough of Nige, I'll marry the Sharif instead.
Yeah. Well, as I said, you were looking broodingly out over a campfire, only you weren't. It was just you didn't have your glasses on and you couldn't see.
He was looking broodingly out of over the campfire, out into the Welsh hills. No, I couldn't see, and there was smoke in my eyes, so I was squinting, and I was hung over to hell. Because I drank enough that I fell asleep on a hill, threw up, and then walked back to my tent.
No, that was the next night.
No, that was the Sunday you saw me brooding, dear.
No, it was no, it was the Saturday.
Was it?
Yes.
Well, I was very drunk on the Friday.
You were?
Well, no, it was Saturday night I was very drunk, because Sunday I got up and was like, I'm fine. It's like, should you not be hungover? No.
But I don't want to feel like we're picking on women here.
We're not.
So, bloke kit.
Bloke kit.
Here is my thing. I'm going to be devil's advocate here.
Right.
Yeah.
It's nicer.
Peasant army.
Oh! Doesn't really come into clothing though, dear. That's next show is peasant army. Next show is peasant army.
I'm saying like, I'm wearing my
white,
linen.
right. Well, linen's not white anyway. Bleached linen is white.
I'm wearing my natural shaded linen.
Yeah, right. Okay.
With a sword.
Okay. Yeah, right. Clothing. Bloke's clothing. If you are a bloke in the early medieval period and you are on a battlefield, you are rich. You can afford to have well-made, well-woven fabric. It might not be dyed, so it being unthing doesn't matter.
Yeah, because it's not Daz sparkling white, is it?
No, but you're going to have natural colours. However, if you've got undyed, natural coloured fabrics and you're on a battlefield, I hope to God that it is some form of like some really intricate
that really nice diamond,
like diamond twill.
Yes.
Or whatever. If it isn't, I would expect to see you even in a washed out dye, because dyes are still expensive.
Yeah.
So you're going to have had it dyed, but it might not be colour fast, and it's going to have faded.
Yeah.
But I would still expect to see someone that can afford to dye fabric, and I would expect it to be of a reasonable... I wouldn't expect a plain weave. I would expect at least, not a herringbone, but just a standard twill weave, which is what the red and the green... My trousers are a plain twill weave. Now, a herringbone is a two-tone weave.
Yeah, it looks like a zigzag.
Yeah, and again, there might possibly be very much a 1960s style pattern that was there, but is also possible in
like a houndstooth.
That's correct.
Yeah.
The houndstooth is also possible, but it is a pain to weave, but I might expect to see it at a... it's alright, the spooky goth wife's heart is melting because the puppy's asleep on the settee and he looks adorable. But you might expect to see a houndstooth pattern, or a high quality diamond weave, or whatever. But generally speaking, if you can afford to have that weave, you can also afford to have it dyed.
Yeah.
Now it might be that dye bath gave you a strong dye at the start, but you've not been able to afford the colour fastness.
Yeah.
So it might have washed out. So you might have started with a very nice strong red that's gone to a light pink.
Yeah.
Or you've started with a woad blue that's washed out, from a strongish woad blue,
Yeah.
and it's not colour fastered, and you've ended up with a beautiful French horizon sky blue of like the World War One shades.
Yeah. You wouldn't see like somebody say, and I'm not going to name any names, with giant, great gaping holes.
No.
All about their shoulder to the point that it's getting to the tablet braid mankini level.
No. There are people who needed kit repairing that wouldn't be on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And shouldn't be on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Also, there is a lot of people, and I'm not casting aspersions on people.
No shade.
There's no shade. Well, there's tons of shade.
There is a lot of shade.
There's a lot of shade. But what I'm saying is there are a lot of people in the society who are carrying swords
Yeah.
who have got fucking god-awful kit. And I couldn't stress that fucking god-awful if I tried any harder.
Yeah.
Like-
I was guilty of this. I will hold my hands up. I did the thing of going to my first tastings and being like, crap, I need a weapon. Oh, £65 hand-weight sword, that'll do the job, with my really crap kit that we've already had the conversation
My advice
about.
to anyone getting into reenactment is if you can't afford, or if you're trying to portray a lower class warrior, or you're in lower class status fabrics, don't bring a sword on the battlefield, bring an axe. It's a more reasonable indication of a weapon you might fight with. And if we're going to be really accurate here about societal norms, and if you're wearing shitty looking kit in terms of colour and fabric weave and everything else, bring a fucking spear. Because every man and his pissing dog would have one. And I mean everyone had spears. It is ubiquitous. Big bugbear, poor warriors, low status clothing don't exist.
Yeah.
A low status warrior is not a poor warrior.
Because you haven't got time to learn how to fight.
You're a
properly.
farmer. And this is the whole
You're
point
trying
of
to
the
live.
fabric. Yeah, and this is the whole point of fabric and decoration.
Trying to get the slugs
and
off
going
the cabbages.
Indeed. Going full circle, people who can afford to spend money on fabric and actually make high quality clothing, very well decorated, even at a base level of different coloured embroidered, and when I say embroidered, a decorative stitch in a different colour, okay, is going to say, to some degree, you've got some spare time and a bit of money because you bought a different coloured thread that's dyed a different colour to hem and finish your clothing. At which point, that's got to take money. This is an agricultural economy, and clothing is one of the basic necessities, which means if you can afford to make fancy clothing, you are rich. Mm-hmm. The problem is people hate being called rich.
Yeah, that's fair. They're like, no, I'm like a middle class, like I'm a farmer.
But you're not, because everyone owns land in this period. It's agricultural based economy.
You have to feed yourself.
Everyone has land because everyone's got to feed themselves. There is not industrialisation as we would look at it as industrialisation. 10 men working blacksmith forges in a fortress is industrialisation, but it's industrialisation on a very small scale to some degree, in a very localised area that might do something for the kingdom. But almost every major hamlet and village is probably going to have a blacksmith. It's also going to have a church. And when the Vikings rock up in their leather and fur, if we're to believe Hollywood, they burn all the churches and they raid all the monasteries.
They're cool.
Yeah, and they don't accept Christianity. Well, newsflash to everyone who believes that, I'm afraid you've been taken for a bit of a ride.
Oh, yes.
Because the first things most of the Anglo-Saxons do when the Vikings start settling is send missionaries north. And what the Vikings start doing is accepting Christianity, but rather than becoming completely Christian, they slot it in alongside their old gods.
Just keep a foot in both. They hedge their bets.
They hedge
That's
their
what
bets,
you do.
yeah.
You don't want to offend
The
anybody.
Romans do the same.
Oh, yeah.
They go, we've landed in Egypt. What are all the Egyptian gods? Oh, it's like this god and this god. Right, we're going to take both of them and build a temple to them both.
Yeah.
And what the Romans eventually do, and this is how crafty we of the legions and we of the SPQR are, is we eventually remove the native god from the temple and just leave it as a dedicated shrine to our god. At which point all the locals have got used to praying to say, and the best one is Jupiter Quentus, which is literally an Egyptian river god who had properties similar to Jupiter, and the Romans built a temple to him on the Nile.
They're just like,
and eventually they just kind of went, and Sequitur, who is an old Egyptian god gets levered into the Nile. He's literally lobbed out of the temple, in effect, and the temple's left just to Jupiter for the harvest.
It's just like...
In a weird... It's like, why? Well, that's how Rome works. And to some degree, Christianity did the same thing. They basically...
Yeah.
sequestered themselves into Viking culture through missionaries and allowing churches to be built, because the Vikings didn't wipe out the local populations. They wiped out that top 5% jobbies and took over ruling.
Yeah.
The vast majority of your farmers were still alive working in the fields, but they're still Christians, they're still Saxons. The Viking diaspora was assimilation, not conquest.
Yeah.
The Vikings land in their leather and fur, according to Hollywood. Do you know what? The reason I say fucking Hollywood in that way is because of Paul Hollywood as well. Just because he really annoys me.
That's a fucking diversion.
It's not, it's Hollywood. And in my head, it's always Paul Hollywood. And I hate the man so much.
It's all Paul Hollywood's
It
fault.
is all Paul Hollywood. No. Leather and Furs from Hollywood would have you believe the Vikings come into England and do one thing: butcher everyone. Right, well, that's the economy tanked.
Yeah, and it's really...
You've literally tanked the economy there, folks.
Yeah, and there's nobody to farm any of these crops that are now going to go and rot in the field, and the Vikings aren't going to have anything to eat.
Well,
so...
they might go and then start farming themselves,
No, you know
but
what I
there's
mean.
going to be vast swathes
Yeah.
of the land which is like, well, it's alright, so everyone's starving to some degree. Oh, we've got a famine. At which point, no, the Vikings came in and they pretty much wiped out what is, in effect, the ruling classes.
Yay.
In an agricultural economy, that's not so great, dear.
Sorry,
That's not so great.
I just kind of wish Jeff Bezos would stay in space.
Well,
but,
yes, but that's fine. And this is the thing. And Viking culture and clothing starts to be an amalgamation of their own cultural clothing and Saxon cultural clothing in terms of decorations and all sorts. And it goes back and forth. And you've got to remember that by the mid-10th century onwards, Christianity and that modesty and the way clothing is worn and what you're doing has spread or started to spread into the Scandinavian realm. That by the 11th century, pretty much Scandinavians, as you look at them, are Christian. The old gods, as you see it, really, the Scandinavian invaders, settlers, traders, whatever, are kind of, to some degree, the last bastion of paganism in Europe in this period. And due to a change in fashion and a movement in religion, to some degree, they are basically whittled away with the old ways, and Christianity very insidiously slots itself into society. And this changes, again, Scandinavian fashion styles. So women don't have the bound hair all in intricate plaits visible and everything. And a lot of it stems from the Freya pendants and stuff, of where we get the idea of women's hair being...
Yeah.
That it's all...
The Valkyrie pendant.
Well, it's not just the Valkyrie, there's a number of pendants. But all the women, as you look at them, and in the artwork, they've all got the hair in, like, I won't say Princess Leia, but you know, like the German plait bun type, and very much where you get like the two plaits behind Luke, a bit like you see in the like that Soviet style, you know, where they've got the plaits. Yeah. That's the whole point. That's a lot of what the artwork is like, and this is where a lot of the time you can say, yeah, so they don't wear headscarves for modesty, but the hair is bound up, and having your hair bound denotes that you're married or you have status. And it's like, if you're a lady whose husband's passed away, your hair's still going to be bound because you were married. You're still respectable.
You've got stuff to get on with.
You have.
You've still got
And
a household.
and the whole point is fashion and clothing is about respectability and showing off with it. So like when you look at fashion and people saying, and we had this where it was asked, does fashion not strata? So someone lower down sees someone higher up and mimics it.
Yeah.
And the whole point of that is no, because fashion and design and decoration isn't about up and down movement. It's about across the level of society where you sit. You're not trying to impress your lessers, you're trying to impress your peers. With fashion, you're always trying to impress your peers.
There wasn't a Viking, like, Anglo-Saxon OK magazine where you'd see, like...
Well, if you watch Horrible Histories, there is.
No, but you know what I mean? You wouldn't have known what the fuck people were wearing 2 hours nowadays down the road, because you wouldn't have gone there, probably.
Well, the higher ups might have done because the monarch moved and everything else. But it's more... you would have rivers, which were your major road points and trade export point, and fashion would come in from those points, and it would disseminate at a secular level, but it wouldn't disseminate down the social tree. It would be the richest person at that level of society. I'm going to take thanes. I'm going to use a bit of an Anglo-Saxon thing here. You may look at it in any other way you want to from a Viking perspective, but it works generally the same way. This is the whole problem when you say early medieval English, early medieval Scandinavians, is actually we're kind of an interlocked society, because the vast majority of the Scandinavian settlers in this country adopt early medieval English routines, laws, ways of working and everything else. The only thing they tend to do is they bring a few of their own laws with them, and they change the names of a lot of the Saxon existing laws to their own kind of terminology, and they put their own spin on it, but mostly they assimilate in. But in terms of how fashion works, is it would normally be your richest thane in the area will have imported something he's liked, like Byzantine style silk.
Yeah.
And lesser people will work out how to embroider that with silk threads on linen because it's cheaper, or woolen threads on wool because it's cheaper, but they're still mimicking, but they're all still in the same social class. But what it is the gentleman who's mimicked that Byzantine style silk is a thane, but he's at the bottom wedge. He's like at that bottom end of that thane class. And the bloke with the silk is at the top end. But wealth-wise, in all of society, they're one strata of society.
Yeah.
And then the next stage below them is going to be their own thing. And it doesn't really, it's not like modern society where you will see Prince Harry, for example, wearing some suit by Hugo Boss or whatever, and you can go out and get a cheaper knockoff imitation version from like George or Top Man or what.
This is what I mean. It's
like you don't get a societal shift pyramidally, like up and down. Society fashion is a cross. It's not until the 20th century, and it is really the 20th century, that you start getting, well, I say 20th, I will say late 18th century onwards, be more accurate. Late 18th century onwards, fashion starts becoming pyramidal. So it starts at the top and it disseminates down, but it changes slightly each stage of the way down. Now you see a very much a great deal in the modern fashion world, where you will have these extravagant monstrosities created by all the big houses, and what that ends up eventually is day-to-day high street fashion.
Yeah.
And you might not think it to look at it, but it's true.
Yeah.
And it can be that sometimes it might just be a colour palette, a fabric pattern, like in terms of a pattern on fabric, or the cut of a certain skirt, jacket, shirt, trouser, whatever, that was used on the catwalks of the high fashion houses. That style of cut of clothing is brought onto the high street, but not made in the same fabrics, or not made to the same level of expense. Now that's modern fashion, and that really does start at the end of the 18th century and moves onwards. Early medieval period, fashion doesn't work like that. Fashion moves across your board of your level of society, and it doesn't really tend to move up or down too much.
Yeah.
Because it's agricultural, and you need time to be able to make that fashion style happen. And if you are working in a field to put food on the table, you don't have time to spare to emulate fashion like that.
No.
Because the whole point of fashion in this period, and being the gaudiest peacock on the battlefield, points out that you are fucking loaded to the nines, and you don't have to do jack shit except train to kill people.
Yeah.
Or laze around on your arse because you've got 400... you don't have to do anything. So fashion... And again, this is Hollywood's fault to some degree, because Hollywood make it so when you look at Vikings or Saxons or whatever, they miss all the social cues.
Well, yeah, there's none of it.
No.
There's none of it. You get like the kind of like Monty Python style person grubbing around in the mud covered in shit.
Narcs!
You get kind of like some sort of like middly classy kind of person where
but
they're not
there's
that
no middle class.
No, and then you get kind of like kings and like uber rich people.
If people really want to understand fashion throughout the medieval period, from the early medieval period, we'll say from the 8th, 9th century onwards, right? And a middle class style of fashion, and a middle class that can dictate how a country runs, 14th century, mid 14th century onwards. It takes the Black Death and then the peasant revolts of Wat Tyler and co. to generate a middle class. And also, to some degree, end serfdom.
Yeah.
And this is the whole point. The middle class were peasants with money, but no social graces. In the early medieval period, that doesn't exist. Because, to some degree, money and fashion don't hold the same values as they do, roughly speaking, 400 or 500 years later in the mid-14th. So if we're talking 900s, and we then look at the 1340s onwards,
and the thing is as well,
there's a big shift. You slowly see.
Yeah.
So you get this early medieval thing. You get the conquest. Fashion changes again in terms of length of tunics, what people are wearing, because the Normans and then the Carolingian French influences on the Normans is brought into the country, but it's only affecting the ruling classes and the top level of classes. The peasant is still pretty much wearing what the peasant's been wearing for the past 600 fucking years.
Well, it's just like how, just to kind of, because I have to relate everything into Greek, they make a big deal of the Spartans, they were all warriors. It's like, yeah, because they relied so heavily on slaves.
Helots. Good old helots.
Because they did all the work while everybody else trained to be soldiers.
But do you want to know what's really depressing about Sparta and the fact all Spartans were meant to be warriors? The reality is that if that was accurately true to the reality, Sparta would only generate 2,000 men.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying about the Anglo-Saxon and the Viking thing, is that you've still got this underlying slave economy where
half the population basically are going to be.
They don't even have any rights.
They're
owned by somebody else.
That's yes and no. There is slaves in the true sense of slaves, but there is also a large swathe indentured because of debts.
Yeah.
Who were still the lower end of society, but they might be upper end. They might be the upper end of the low half of society, who have fallen on hard times, have got behind on rents, be it from food or whatever, and so to pay off their debt, they've become indentured to the church, their local lord, and as soon as their debt is recuperated, they are free men again.
So it's basically like the Elon Musk thing that he said, you can come to Mars on the colony, you just have to pay your travel off by working for free.
Yeah.
Yeah,
basically, yes, it's indentured. Yeah. But the ancient world had a similar system which they used as tax, which is a labour tax.
Yeah.
Where if you were an agricultural worker, so money wasn't your normal thing, there are periods when you aren't working because the fields aren't needing to be worked. So what you do is you work to pay off your debt. And to some degree, it's actually how a lot of the big monuments in the ancient world were built. And in the medieval period, we don't have that. But what we do have in our period is indentured workers who are free men who have given up their freedom to pay off their debts because they might not have the financial backing to do it.
Yeah.
And this is the whole thing. So you've got all these different stratas of society, and it's all going to affect what you can wear because it's what you can afford.
Yeah.
And you've got to remember that a lot of the fashion worn by a slave is going to be clothing from everyone above them that is so worn out and patched.
It's like the ultimate youngest sibling syndrome.
Because if we go back to the start of this whole thing where I said a basic tunic will cost you £35,000.
Yeah.
That tunic, you're going to want to get your money's worth from that.
Oh, God, yeah.
At which point you are going to wear it unto death and repair it with random scraps of fabric and offcut till it reaches a point where, societally speaking, it's unacceptable for you to wear it. So the first thing you do is you hand it to the slaves.
And I'm just on the unto death. Because obviously all of the finds tend to mainly be from grave finds.
They're fragmented pieces anyway.
Yeah, but are you going to bury Granny in her cooking apron and her shitty clothes.
Or are you going to bury her in her finest get-up?
In her favourite dress.
Yeah. 9 out of 10 times, you're probably going to bury them in their favourite clothing with their favourite ornaments and intricate things that don't serve any purpose for someone else.
Well, you want them to have them. Do you know what I mean? To take with them.
Well, yeah, but grave goods in that regard aren't often in the same way that the Romans and the Greeks do of in the afterlife. But
this is the thing. It's like if you decided to base, you know,
now there's a couple where there are graves with the clothing, and the grave goods with them aren't particularly that good a quality. Okay. And you'd be like, compared to the clothing and the remains of the clothing, you'd think the other grave goods would be good. But as it pointed out, it might have been their second best because their best has been inherited by their daughter or their sons or whatever. Yeah. So it's like, it's not always an accurate representation to say they'd be buried with their best equipment, but they will always be buried with something that probably had some sentimental value to them. So it might be something old, which is broken, but they've had it a long time, like a comb that has been repaired so many times that you wouldn't pass it on to, like, your daughter, because your daughter's had, like, you've been bought a new beautiful antler comb, which is all engraved and whatever, and you didn't get much use from it because you're in your 60s and you're old and wizened. For the time. And it's like, because you've spent all your life working, or maybe not working but doing whatever. So you pass your best quality comb to your daughter. And then your second best comb, which is the one you've actually had since you were a young girl getting married, and you've had the tines replaced, and you've done it. And it's like, is it the same comb when you first had it? Yes, it is. It's the, yes, that one.
But I think I was just kind of trying to say, it's like, if you were 4,000 years in the future, and you dug up a load of people from our time period, you'd think, oh, they all wore suits.
Yeah.
And all the women wore all these fancy
twin set pearls and stuff.
Fancy dresses or whatever. And you just think, oh, well, that's what they got buried in. And it's like, because you're not going to generally bury somebody in their jeans and the t-shirt that they slob around in.
No.
Or their jogging bottoms. Or their slankets.
Yeah. Now, you see, my plan is to be cremated.
Yes.
But here's the joke. Because I will be cremated in Vike kit with some nice brooches on. Okay.
Okay, this is the first I've heard about this.
No, I've explained it to you before. Because I've said, and I've explained it to Fliss before, but we've slept and drank and all sorts since then. But I've said, be cremated, but then put my ashes in a Vike period reconstructed urn and bury me with my Dane axes in the ground. So then archaeology in the future can dig up my grave and there's a load of Vike period stuff, but the carbon dating of it will end up putting it like mid-20th, 21st century, and they're going to freak out. And that's my plan to piss off archaeologists in the future.
And on that note,
because, we've been going for a while now, I'm going to stop. Thank you for listening. There will be another one. Yes, like and subscribe, like and share, spread the word and the love of the Angry History Chef. And I will do another early medieval one next week. It looks like I'll aim for a 4-parter with explaining a lot of this stuff as best I can. Good night and bienvenue.
Calispera.